Every human being has a deep desire to be understood, regardless of how irrational their behavior is.
Or awful they are doing things, like
Yes.
people who are doing like terrorists or people like that.
Yes. It's a cry for help. It's a desire to be understood. People typically resort to violence in most cases when no one is listening. No one understands them. They don't feel heard. So they've been trying to be heard and no one has listened, so they resort to violence to get attention. I mean, that's what terrorism is about, or any violent hostage taking. It's a desire to be heard.
So, hello Chris, I'm very impressed to have an interview with a FBI negotiator. Maybe you can introduce yourself and tell me a little bit who you are.
Sure, yeah. Chris Voss, former FBI hostage negotiator, was the FBI's lead international kidnapping negotiator. After I left the FBI, I taught business negotiation to business school students, universities in the United States, Georgetown, USC, Harvard, and wrote a business book on negotiation using the principles from hostage negotiation and applying them to business and personal life.
What I find the most impressive is you show us that negotiation is not what we ordinarily think.
Right.
We have the idea of negotiating is complex, is based on a kind of subtle aggression, is a kind of manipulation.
Right.
And what I find so impressive and moving in your book is you show that not the way to doing it. And it's not someone who is naive who says that, it's someone who had been in the worst situation to have to negotiate. So what you're saying is very surprising and even shocking. Maybe if you can explain what does that mean, negotiating?
Yeah, well, another way to look at negotiation is navigating obstacles. And the fact that human beings make up their mind, based on a few certain ideas, no matter where they're from, no matter what their religion is, no matter what their ethnicity is, no matter what their diet is. We're all human beings that are in our basic core, so we make up our minds the same. We want to collaborate. We are faced with problems. In my company, the Black Swan Group, now what we've taken, we call it the Black Swan Method. We say the adversary is the situation. Like if you and I are negotiating, you and I both are faced with different aspects of the exact same problem. So it's best if we collaborate rather than oppose each other, because we both see a problem and we have different aspects of it. And then human beings are hardwired, forgive my American phrases. We're built to collaborate. You and I talked earlier about my co-author, Tal Raz. And actually 3 people wrote the book: me, Tal Raz, and my son, Brandon. Great collaboration between the 3 of us. Tal says that the human beings that survived were the ones that collaborated with each other, which means that all of us have a sort of a genetic code to collaborate. We're afraid to because so many people attack us. But we're all really coded to collaborate, and that's the whole approach on the book. We should collaborate for a better outcome.
One thing you also show that really struck me, because I never thought about it, is we always negotiating. It's not just businessman. With our family, with our children,
right,
with our parents, all the time we have to negotiate. And that is I was very surprised, because I never thought about that before I read your book.
Yeah. If you're thinking, I want, if you're saying, I want, you're in a negotiation.
You want your children to go to bed, in one sense, is already the way you're saying to them. If you are not aggressive, if you try to make a collaboration, that's already starting negotiating.
Right. Yes, exactly. Everything.
And do you will agree that in one sense, your book is how to overcome aggression? Because we could say we tend to become aggressive.
I got to stop you because you just asked me, do I agree? What did we talk about before? Do I disagree?
Yes. Do you? Yes.
We're going to go from yes to no, right?
Yes. Do you disagree?
Aha!
That's one of the. Maybe you have to explain why you're saying that. Why it's better to go to no than to yes?
Yeah, that's the smallest thing that has the biggest impact. Because if you do you agree? Maybe I don't agree, but I'm afraid to tell you why I don't agree. Anytime someone is trying to get me to say yes, I get nervous. We love to hear yes. The real big difference in negotiation is understanding it's different for you than it is for me. You know, what I love to hear is different than what I want to say. I love to hear yes, but I'm worried when I say yes, what am I committing myself to? And so in any language, it doesn't matter. If you switch from yes to no, instead of do you agree, do you disagree? And I'll be relieved to hear that. I'll say, no, I don't disagree, and here's what I think. It's something about the feeling of safety that makes people open up.
Yes, to have to say yes, you feel a little bit nervous. You are, because you get a kind of engagement, and when you say no, it's more secure.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
You explain in your book that in 1970s there was a plane who was hijacked, and the FBI didn't act in a proper way and was condemned. Maybe you can explain these stories, because he shows us how negotiating become part of the task of the FBI.
Yeah. Not just the FBI, but almost all law enforcement. You know, we always had guns. We always had, SWAT teams, special weapons and tactics. You know, in France, there's RAID, research, assistance, intervention, and deterrence. Those have always been there. And we thought as human beings, just simply we could force people to agree. That's one look at it. And so the FBI, there was a hijacking, and we thought simply if we surrounded the plane, we could force him to agree. We could force him to give up. We could threaten him with his life. You know, the problem of what our academic colleagues would say, projection bias. What does that mean? Well, I don't want to die, so therefore you don't want to die. Therefore, all I have to do is to threaten to kill you because you don't want to die. And that was wrong. The FBI had it wrong. Everybody had it wrong.
Can you tell the stories of this?
Well, it was a hijacked plane, and they thought if they surrounded the plane and they threatened to kill the hijacker, that he would let people go. And then he didn't agree, and then they tried to take off the plane, and they tried to shoot the tires out. You know, they did everything wrong. They tried to use force, and people died. And then they sued the FBI for not talking, for not having negotiators. And that was the beginning of, that happened with the FBI. It happened in a lot of other places in the United States, and I'm sure outside of the United States. And they realized you have to find a way to talk to people.
What I find very interesting is in these stories is negotiating, that we have a tendency to imagine as a way to manipulate people, is a way to avoid threatening people. And when you start from this basis, you understand more why we need to learn to negotiate.
Yes, yeah, it's collaboration. Every human being has a deep desire to be understood, regardless of how irrational their behavior is.
Or awful they are doing things, like
yes.
people who are doing like terrorists or people like that.
Yes, It's a cry for help. It's a desire to be understood. People typically resort to violence in most cases when no one is listening. No one understands them. They don't feel heard. So they've been trying to be heard and no one has listened, so they resort to violence to get attention. I mean, that's what terrorism is about, or any violent hostage taking. It's a desire to be heard.
When we look at your approach of negotiating, there is three things that are really strong and also surprising. One is we are not rational and willing to negotiate from the point of view that we are rational beings, and by being rational we're going to go somewhere, is a big mistake, is
Right.
irrational in one
Right,
sense.
right.
Willing to be just rational in negotiating is being irrational.
Right. Yeah, most people's attitude is, I'm rational, but you're irrational.
Yes.
How do you make people around me be rational? Well,
Yes, and we want to negotiate. We think what is the most rational, what is the most
Right.
logic, and we want to be logical. And we think if we arrive to be logical, we will arrive somewhere. And,
Right.
and it's not the truth.
Right, right. Because you decide what's rational based on what matters to you, what you care most about. That makes rationality, by definition, emotional. Your rationality, your logic is based on what you care about. Along those lines, Quentin Tarantino, American filmmaker, depicts some of the most violent acts on camera. And I'm astonished because it's violence typically committed against, you would think that's horrible, but the person of violence is being committed against is usually someone you don't like at all. Like one of his films is about World War II. And they burn, they commit all this violence against Nazis. And I'm watching this movie and I'm thinking, like, I am in favor of the violence because I don't like the people that are being hurt. So it's all in the eyes of the beholder. How do we feel about what's going on?
But also, I was more thinking also about the fact that our decisions are much more emotional than we thought. And you talk about all the discovering of Kahneman, the Nobel Prize, and how that
Yes.
help you to understand another understanding of human beings.
I was taught as a hostage negotiator, look first for their sense of loss. What they're doing this because they felt they lost something. And if you look for it, you're going to find it very quickly. So I only thought that applied to hostage negotiation, terrorist and kidnappings. But then, as you said, in 2002, Daniel Kahneman wins the Nobel Prize for behavioral economics that says a loss hurts a person twice as much as an equivalent gain, which then really means that for all human beings, the first thing they think about is the loss. What is the loss? And so it wasn't just hostage negotiations, it was all human behavior. It's not that that's the only thing that people think about. It's just the biggest thing. The biggest impact is a human being's perception of loss. So then if you look at it from that perspective, that changes every negotiation.
Could you give an example?
If I want you to change your behavior into something that's going to be very good for you, but if you don't change, you're not going to get it. I'm not going to say, here's a gain, this is how much you will improve yourself. I'll say, what happens if you do nothing? What will happen to you if you do nothing? There was a company in the United States, they were telling me that what they did was they sold executive benefits to companies, better pension plans. I'm going to retain you as a corporate executive because we help you invest your pension and you'll make more money if you stay working for us because your pension after you retire will be more. And so they go to companies and they say, we can improve your pension plan by 20%. They offer a 20% gain. And they found instead, they said, let us look at how you're investing your money. And then their approach is, don't invest with us and you lose 20% every year. Now that's taking the exact same scenario, 20% gain if you come with us, 20% loss if you don't come with us. And more people chose to go with them when they said, you'll lose if you don't come with us. Because as Kahneman says, a loss thinks twice as much as an equivalent gain. So if I can get you to see the loss by your inaction, or if I can get you to see the loss by your different choice, you're more likely to change your mind and go a different direction if you see a loss.
So that means that in every negotiation, you have to take care of the emotional state of being of the other person.
Yes.
And forget about that is a big mistake.
It's huge. It could be the biggest single mistake. It drives more negotiations away than any other single thing does.
And how do you go with the emotion? What does that mean to relate to the emotional aspect of negotiating?
Well, it's very difficult at first, but with practice, I know the impact that the things that I say are going to have on you. If I say to you, look, I would like you to do this because it's very important to me. Well, that impact is you're going to think I'm very selfish. Because I'm most interested in me and I don't care about you at all. So I have to know that my words are going to have a negative impact on you. So I might say, this is going to make me look very selfish. This matters to me. So that inoculates, if you will, the negative reaction to what I'm getting ready to say. So it's an understanding of really how my words are going to impact you, and then anticipating that, seeing it coming.
So that's the first split, in one sense, that you invite us to do. The second split, which is the title of the book in France, c'est Ne jamais couper la poire en deux, which is very French colloquial, but which means don't try to make compromise. And that, I remember the first time I read the book, I just found that so strong idea.
Yeah, compromise is really bad because
everybody thinks negotiating is we do half. Before I read your book, I thought, oh yes, I want that, you want that, and maybe we can try the middle, and if we arrive the middle, we both win, and that's so evident, and you just saw that not at all evident.
Right, because the impact is both people lost.
One of the stories I love is the stories of the shoes.
Yeah, well, if you can't decide whether to wear black shoes or brown shoes, or black shoes or yellow shoes, then I'll wear one black and one yellow. That makes no sense.
Yes, that idea of compromising, that you use one shoes and one other, or you have an argument with your wife and your wife wants you to have black shoes and you want to have brown shoes, and I will wear one brown and one on black. So why doesn't work compromise?
Yeah. Well, everybody misinterprets it also. And one of my favorite examples, really, from the United States, an athlete that has become famous, maybe for not good reasons, Colin Kaepernick, an NFL quarterback, mixed family, identifies as African-American, black. And suddenly while he was playing, they noticed that he wouldn't stand for the national anthem. It's typical in National Football League games. All the players stand and rise for the national anthem. And he was unhappy about a number of things, so he refused to stand. He remained seated on the bench. And then he began to say it was his way of protesting racism in the United States. So a member of the American military met with him personally and said, you know, I can understand your problems. You believe that there's racism in the United States. And at the same time, you know, the flag represents a lot to Americans who have died for their country. And so the member of the military said to him, we show respect at the graveside of a fallen comrade by taking a knee, dropping to one knee. So Colin Kaepernick, to his credit as a human being, was moved by that plea from the American military man. And so as a compromise, he agreed to go to the edge of the field during the national anthem and take a knee. He did it as a sign of increased respect. And the world made it worse for him. Like the people that were mad at him for sitting got even madder at him because he meant to show increased respect as a compromise move. No one in the United States has credited him with trying to show more respect for the flag by taking a knee because it was a compromise agreement with someone from the American Armed Forces. That's been completely lost. So when you compromise, everybody else misinterprets it. They don't understand what your original intent was. And the fact that he started to take a knee to show more respect for the flag rather than less has completely been lost. And that's typical of compromises.
What will be what you will have told him? What kind of way?
I think maybe to express what he was doing more. I think when people compromise, they talk less about it and what their motivations were and what's behind it. And then as soon as people start to misinterpret it, their voice gets lost. And I think his voice very much got lost because there were people on both sides of the issue that became even louder. And they also forgot that Colin Kaepernick was a young man when he did this. In a period of time, for any professional athlete anywhere in the world, the spotlight that's on them is very intense. They make massive amounts of money. And people forget that most of them are still young men in their early 20s who are still trying to find their way. Or, you know, biologically, neurologically, the brain isn't even finished forming decision-making wise until 25, 26 years old. And so it's very difficult for people in their early 20s to be able to make those sorts of decisions, and then the world's glare and the intensity on them from the media worldwide, everybody forgets that this person who's a multimillionaire is still a kid who's 24 years old.
So what kind of negotiation, what you will try to, what will be the negotiation with him, what you will ask him to do?
I think I would, if I would have been, I'd have said, here's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And then also say, to show that I understand why you don't like it, here's why you don't like it. You feel that this is disrespectful to the flag. You feel this makes me seem ungrateful. As soon as you begin to tell other people how, that you're aware of how they see it, you don't agree. You know, by saying that, he never meant to be disrespectful to the flag and the ideals. At least that's not what he said at the beginning. But people have twisted his words so much. Nobody has any idea really what his point was originally, or that he understood the other side's point. And as soon as you show that you understand the other side's point, it changes the conversation.
Do you have another example?
Maybe I know I'm sort of I'm not explaining this well. When I was an FBI agent, we had a trial against where we put a legitimate Muslim cleric who committed crimes we put him on trial. And we had Muslims voluntarily testifying against him in civilian court. And every single time that I sat down with any of those Muslims from the Middle East, Arab Muslims, and a lot of people say Muslim don't understand the difference between an Arab Muslim or a Filipino Muslim. You know, politics is local, if you will. So is religion. But I would sit down with them and I would say, you feel that every American government for the past 200 years has been anti-Islamic. And they would look at me and they would go, yeah. And then they would agree to cooperate. They would agree to go on the stand and testify. Tell the truth, period. I couldn't say, look, he's committed crimes. It doesn't matter that he's a cleric. I could have said, this is the United States. This is our system of laws. I could have made my points. But I started out with, you feel. This is how you see me. You see me as a representative of a government that's been anti-Islamic for the last 200 years. Now, I never said it was true, and I never said that I agreed. And it would change their perspective as soon as I showed them I understood what their perspective was. In a business sense, my company charged more for our services than any other negotiation company. You will pay more to hire us than you will pay anyone else. And when you call us on the phone and you ask us, how much does it cost to hire the Black Swan Group? Whoever you talk to on the phone, whether it be me, our director of business development, a young lady who's very, very smart, Davy. Davy will say to you, we are very, 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 very expensive. And won't say another word. And one of our clients that hired us just the other day, Davey said that to him right away. And he says, I remember in that moment, because I'm experienced in sales, that I would never say that to anyone. I remember thinking, this is the worst sales pitch I ever heard. And then 2 days later, I signed the agreement. He never agreed to another company's terms that fast in his whole history. But as soon as she said, we are very, very, very expensive, then he wanted to know what we were going to do as opposed to how much we cost. And as soon as the conversation changed to how we were going to transform his company, he said he never had a negotiation from the first call to the agreement that was only 2 days. That was the fastest it had ever gone for him. So it's the same thing. You're going to feel we're expensive. So I'm going to say that right away.
And also, that the third point, you are really starting by the relationship, which all what you're saying is taking a lot of respect of the other person. And there's almost a kind of spiritual, if I can say that, almost a spiritual aspect of your book, because you're always trying to look what kind of humanity, what kind of goodness there is, even if it's very little, in the other person. And that also go completely against the general idea, I'm afraid, I should be afraid, I should win. And already in what you describe, I'm very, very expensive, you're not in the way, I win or you win, you are going in another field when we can communicate on another level. And in one sense, negotiating is going in another field of relationship.
Well, that's what I like very much about this conversation, because we almost never talk about the fact that it is spiritual. It is a spiritual connection. To connect one person to another becomes very spiritual. And that's why in many times there have been comparisons made to the Black Swan method, and they say, well, it's like Zen, or the often comparisons to spiritual ideas are brought up a lot when people begin to feel the difference that it makes. And it is about human connection and about both of us getting better together. That's why anytime somebody tells me they've enjoyed reading the book, I already know they want to do well with people, not against people.
Yes, that's the third. Well said. That's the third point. Going with people and not going against people. So it's already that's the setup of your books.
Yeah.
Not looking for compromise. Not going against people. And not and accepting emotion for negotiating. I think that the three things that really strike me in your book, and I found so much more human.
Yeah, I think so, yes.
So maybe we can go now into some tools for people. One thing you said is it's better to not lying.
Lying is very bad, yeah.
Yes, normally we think it's better to lie. We never have to say the truth in negotiating, otherwise we're going to lose. And you just show the contrary. Maybe if you can explain why it's not so good idea to lie.
Well, if we're going to collaborate, I need to trust you. And if you're lying to me, I can't trust you. Now, a lot of people lie just defensively. They're afraid to tell the truth.
Yes.
They're afraid that the truth is going to hurt them, or that they'll lose leverage, or that they'll be more vulnerable.
Yeah, for example, in my work as a publisher, I want to buy a book by an author. I think it's very important. I'm thinking if I said that I really love the book, that is really important for me, I have less chance to succeed the deal than if I lie and say, oh, there is some good point and some bad points. So we have this, we make this mistake. And you why is better to go in for saying the truth in this case, by example?
Well, there's always a better deal. One of our sayings is never be so sure of what you want that you wouldn't take something better. So if we talk to each other and we really find out about each other and we tell the truth, it's guaranteed that we will find a better deal. But you've got to open up to me and be honest. And for me to get you to open up, the fastest way to do that is if I open up. Now, the only reason why I shouldn't open up is if I've decided ahead of time whether or not I could say no. Don't take yourself hostage. As soon as you feel like you can't say no, you've taken yourself hostage. But if you say to yourself, I can reveal all my truth, everything that's true, how much I love the book, how much I love the product, and I could still say no, then I'm free to talk about anything. So the real issue is whether or not you've taken yourself hostage. What are you afraid of? One of the stories of my book is when I bought this sport utility vehicle, this Toyota 4Runner that I absolutely love. When I first saw it, I completely fell in love with it. I wanted that vehicle. And there were no other vehicles like it anywhere. It was very scarce. It wasn't like I could find it anywhere. And I looked all around. I looked everywhere within 100 miles. There wasn't any place that I could find this exact vehicle. And it was the color. It was this beautiful, beautiful red. They called it salsa red pearl. And I just saw it and I went like, oh, I love the color. So that's what I said when I negotiated with the salesman. I said, I love this truck. I mean, I love it. And I really want it. And I know I can't find it anywhere else. How am I supposed to pay what you want? And he just looked at me and he blinked 2 or 3 times. And he got up and he walked away from the table. And then he came back with a lower offer. And then I said, oh my God, that was wonderful. That was generous. The truck is worth what you were asking me for, let alone what it's worth, what you're offering me even less now. And I love it. I love it. If I didn't have it, I'd be sad. It's beautiful. There's no other truck like it. How am I supposed to pay that? And he just stared at me and blinked a few times and went and came back with a lower offer. And we did that about 5 times. But so then, I just, what are his reasons he thinks I should make the deal? I'll say it, and then I'll still say no.
I understand. One other thing is don't get discouraged when you receive a no. Why? When we have no, normally we think it's over. The game is over, we want to negotiate, the other person say no.
Right.
And you explain, no is not the end of the deal.
No. People feel safe when they say no. When they're unsure, they say no. And since saying no makes someone feel safe, then if they still don't have reasons for doing the deal, they'll tell you. And I need you to tell me what the problems are. I need you to tell me what a good deal looks like. You're more likely to tell me after you've said no, because you feel safe. You feel like there's no commitment. We were talking earlier, I was coaching my girlfriend through a negotiation. They were trying to get a photographer to share all the photographs that he'd taken. And they didn't know what was going on with the other person, and they wanted to say, would you please do this? Which the answer to that would be, yes, I'll do it. But he's out of the country. He's in a position where it was very difficult for him to if he says yes, he can't do it right now. So I had her ask him, is it impossible to do this? And he immediately came back and said, no, it's not impossible. I'm just in another country. I'm away from my computer. I can't get it done before Monday.
So just to not answering the no, but say, isn't impossible to do it, you reopen the situation.
Yes.
By taking care of the other person.
Yes.
In one sense, is what happened. The move was he was respected in his own difficulties and his own problem.
Exactly.
And also one of the key points in all the tools that you gave is what you call active listening, which is quite a profound tools. It looks like, in one sense, what I call meditation, but it's the fact that even if we don't realize, we tend to have presumption or believing about what the other person will say, what we imagine what the people think, and active listening is accepting to be in a moment, in a state of not knowing.
In a state of not knowing, and I will add, I think the description is really proactive listening.
Proactive listening, yes.
Because, of course, active listening is to be very much in the moment and to be actually paying attention to what the other person is saying and feeling and watching their body language and watching the look on their face and watching how they say things. And to switch from active to proactive, which really we've only learned maybe in the last 10 years about neuroscience. Before we had neuroscience, we had psychology. And we're trying to guess what's going on in someone's mind based on what they tell us. And that's like trying to guess what's going on in another room, being able to only hear the dialogue. And movies and TV shows all have comedic situations where somebody in another room says something and it's overheard in the other room and completely misinterpreted. But with neuroscience, we can see in the brain and we can watch the electrical activity of the brain. And we know from neuroscience that the brain thinks mostly negatively. We know the parts of the brain in general terms where negative emotions flow. and they did a brain science experiment where they showed someone a picture that was just a sad picture. I don't know what the pictures were. Maybe a homeless person in the rain, something that would evoke a negative thought. And they have the fMRI around someone's head so they could watch the electrical activity. And they show them the picture, and they watch the electrical activity in the negative part of the brain increase. And in most of the brain, so the brain is mostly negative. So first thing we know. Second thing we know then when they say, what do you feel? How does this picture make you feel? And every single time the person identified the negative emotion, the electrical activity in that part of the brain diminished. Simple identification. And so if I know when we engage in a negotiation that your DNA, your mental wiring is for you to be negative to begin with.
I'm angry, I'm pissed off. If you recognize it, that will lessen the...
All I have to do is recognize it, call it out.
And also, in this proactive listening is when we go to negotiating, if we have all our thinking, I should say that, I want that is my plan, I miss completely the information, I miss to meet you, I don't listen really to you. Also,
exactly.
It's why I say accepting in one sense to not knowing,
yes.
Accepting to relate to the unknown, taking the risk of that is part of listening.
Yeah. And in meditation, much of meditation is clearing your mind of largely negative thoughts. Once having cleared your mind of negative thoughts, then the mind is this phenomenal receptor of information. And whether it's information about you or whether it's even spiritual information that you can sense and you can feel and you can know, as soon as you get the negative out of the way.
Maybe you can tell one of those stories when you work with when you work at the FBI and people take a hostage and you have to communicate with them. And in this case, you have to learn to listening what the other person said. Maybe you can tell one of this.
Well, it's listening also, and then understanding the impact my voice is going to have on you. Because before I've even finished a sentence, the sound of my voice is going to change the way that you think and change the way that you feel. And so in hostage negotiation, we're taught to have a calm voice. And what that means is mostly speak more slowly and then also inflect your voice down, which is what I'm doing right now. Now, I know that's going to have an impact on your thinking. Now, whether you're a man or a woman, you could do this. Because I'm a man, my voice sounds deeper. But even a woman, regardless of her voice, if she drops her chin when she talks, your voice automatically comes down. So I'm negotiating at a bank robbery with hostages in New York City. And I'm the second hostage negotiator. And the first bank robber on the phone, I was so calm that he actually didn't want to talk to me anymore, and he handed the phone to another bank robber inside who was very upset. And 90 seconds into the conversation, the second bank robber who was upset said, "I trust you." Now, I hadn't given him enough reason to trust me, but I had been using the voice that goes down at the end. And it made him change the way he felt. And he ended up agreeing to surrender to me personally about an hour and a half later, really based on the impact of the sound of my voice.
So the sound of the voice, the fact that you recognize emotion and not just rational, the fact that you open a relation with him,
mm-hmm.
the fact that you didn't have any plan, but you create a relation that all, if we try to understand what happened in just the way you talk and make a relation and create a space.
Yes.
For he can also calm down his own fear.
And there's a difference between trust and forcing someone into an idea. In a business negotiation example, we have there's an American legal phrase called work for hire. And if it's in the contract, then that means that you own the information. So in the United States, we get a training contract, and the company will try to put a work for hire phrase, which means they now own our ideas. And if they own our ideas, they don't have to pay us anymore. And if they own our ideas, they can compete against us. And they can continue to use our ideas without our permission. So I never sign a contract that contains a work for hire clause unless the very next sentence invalidates the clause. And sometimes they want a work for hire clause, and I'll say, all right, we'll put this in, which basically says work for hire doesn't matter. It's silly, but that's the way that lawyers are. But how do I do that? If in a negotiation I could say, we don't do work for hire, you would feel attacked. But instead I say, we don't do work for hire.
Yes, it's different. I can feel it.
You can feel the difference.
Yes.
And one of two things always happens. They offer to take the clause out, or in certain instances, they offer to write more in that invalidates the clause, which in my view is silly, but the effect is the same.
Another aspect that really impressed me is the stories when you had to negotiate with people over the I don't know if it was over the phone, and no one answered to you for 5 hours.
Oh, it was voice to voice. I was standing outside an apartment.
Yes, maybe you can tell the stories.
Yeah, well, for hostage negotiators, it's also a rite of passage to talk to a house or an apartment that nobody's inside. The police get there too late, they're already gone. That happens, and everybody has to get used to that. It's a very awkward and uncomfortable feeling. So we were on the 27th floor of a high-rise in Harlem in New York City, and we took so many people, and we made so much noise that I was certain that the fugitives were not going to be there when we got there. So, and I had two very new negotiators with me, and I thought, well, this is your opportunity to talk to an empty house. I myself had spoken to an empty house just 6 months earlier. It feels very awkward, but you have to do it.
So you was not, because you thought that there was no one?
Yeah, we thought they were already gone by the time I thought they were gone.
Who was there?
They were three fugitives.
Okay.
And they had been involved in a shootout with automatic weapons in a park in Harlem just a couple of days earlier. So
Okay.
they were very violent, very dangerous, not afraid to shoot, and with automatic weapons, which made them even more dangerous.
So you talked to them through the.
We were talking through the door. I was out in the hall with the SWAT team and with the two other negotiators. You know, there were a line of us. They have a SWAT person in front of me who's got on all the ballistic helmet and the vest and everything, and then I was second in line. And they had another SWAT person behind me who's holding onto my belt, because if gunfire gets started, they have to be able to throw me out of the way. So the person behind me in line has got me firmly by my belt to throw me if necessary.
So you thought there was no one, and you started.
Yeah, I mean, we had to act like they were inside, but I didn't think they were there. So I started to talk to them with a calm, late night, relaxing voice. And I started to guess what they would be feeling if they were inside.
Yes, that's the point. If the other person don't want to talk, you try to formulate what you think they could feel
Right.
to create a relationship
Right.
and a kind of empathy.
Yes, exactly. Yes, it is empathy. It's
so you-
exactly what it is.
So you did that.
So I said, I know you don't want to go to jail. It would seem obvious, but you have to say it. Even though they were dangerous and violent people, they're still scared. I said, I know you're scared. I know you don't want to come out. What are they thinking if they're really in and they come out? They've seen in the movies all the time the people that get arrested, the FBI beats them up, they put them in handcuffs, they slam them to the ground, they get treated really badly. That's predictable. So I say, I know you're afraid of how you're going to be treated when you come out. So then I described in very small detail every step of the way that they would come out without being hurt and how they would come out slowly. And, I said, when you open the door, first you bring your hands out and we'll see your hands. And if you come out slowly, then we'll see your arms, then we'll see your elbows, then we'll see your shoulders, and we'll see that there's nothing in your hands. And you'll come out slowly and you'll look to the right and you'll see a SWAT member and he's there. And as long as you don't move suddenly, he won't hurt you. And then you'll move slowly to the right. And I describe this in great detail, which takes a lot of time. We talked to that apartment for 6 hours. Didn't hear a word. 6 hours in, a sniper on a building nearby said, I just saw a curtain move inside. Now, I'd been talking to them the whole time, convinced that there was nobody inside. I just thought I was practicing. But then I said, we saw the curtain move. We know you're in there. I've been telling you for 6 hours, we're not going to go away. And talked to her for a few more minutes, and the door opened. And then we saw hands, and the forearm, and the elbow, and the shoulders. And the first one out was a female. She looked to the right. She moved slowly to the right, and never said a word. All of them came out. They never said a word. And when I went to talk to her afterwards, I said, why didn't you say anything for 6 hours? Why didn't you say something? She said, well, we wanted to get away. And I said, so why'd you come out? She said, because you said you weren't leaving. And I said it in a way that made it sound like, the whole time while we were outside, our commanders were thinking about, we've been here for 6 hours, we're wasting our time. We're going to give it another hour. They're not here. She didn't know how close we were to leaving. And the investigators kept saying, no, we know they're in there. We know they're in there. Don't leave, don't leave, don't leave. But there was a big discussion going on the outside about whether or not we would leave. But they don't know that.
Amazing.
So it was a good story. It's a good day.
Yeah, it's a good story, and he showed a lot about the fact that you said that you will not leave have a much greater impact that you could imagine.
Yes, that's true. No one imagines how great the impact that words of understanding can really be. And it's the other thing I like about neuroscience, because words of understanding cause a neurochemical change in you, and the neurochemical that you feel is oxytocin. And oxytocin is the bonding drug. So when you feel understood, you bond with me. Now, the other thing that I found out just recently, I'm a very big fan of Andrew Huberman, who's a neuroscientist out of Stanford University, who has a podcast called Huberman Labs Podcast. And he's got a fantastic amount of neurochemical information. and what I heard in one of his podcasts recently was also when you feel oxytocin, you're more likely to tell the truth. It increases people's feelings of wanting to tell the truth. So not only do you feel bonded to me, but you're more likely to tell me the truth when you feel understood. Which gets us back to our original point about not lying.
It's what you said. What you can, someone who kidnap people, how you negotiate with them. What do they want? And it's what you said. If we don't want to give them money, we can give them a way to relate with them.
Mm-hmm. And if we don't get completely away from money, we'll give them less. And they won't, and they'll take it. They're more likely to take it. They'll take less every time.
Why?
Well, that's a neuroscience question. And I think maybe it has to do with, even if they're a sociopath, they still are impacted by neurochemicals. And so I want to change your way of thinking. I want to make you feel like you did really well. And I want to make you feel good about it sooner. And the sooner you feel good about it, the sooner we have a deal.
I think, yes, thank you very much. I find it's really helpful to have this vision about negotiating, but in fact, how we can open relationship with other people is also a way, maybe to conclude our discussion. I find you're really empowered when we read your book and you see you really help us to be empowered. We feel normally about all that we are not, we will never succeed. It's too difficult when we are not FBI, but ordinary people like us. But you try to show that we are to empower us. As human beings, we have more ability to succeed negotiating than we thought, because all what we describe is really human quality. It's not very abstract and technical things. It's very subtle, it's very precise, it's really come from a very fine understanding of human beings and,
yes,
and the brain, but always is very human tools that we all have.
It's very human, exactly right. And everybody really does have the tools to do this. Everybody does.
Because when I first read your book, I thought, I'm too oversensitive, I'm too emotional, it's not for me, you know. Negotiating is for people who are very rational, who have no emotion, who could be very, but it's an illusion.
Right.
What I understand from your book is a complete illusion. We can negotiating by relating with who we are and really make peace with tools we have in ourselves that we didn't know.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, anyone can do this. All they have to do is want to learn it. And you learn faster if you enjoy it. You know, let it be fun. Let mistakes be fun. Because with mistakes, you learn more.
Thank you so much.
The pleasure was mine.